Hey, what's up? So today, just doing a hopefully quick deck profile on my Invoke, Dogmatika, Dragoon, Shuttle deck. So that's kind of a long, ridiculous name, but mainly it's just an Invoke Dogmatika deck splashed with some additional fusion. So it's kind of like a super fusion deck that, all we do is fusion summon, we don't really do anything else. Um, so I would say this is probably my most competitive deck out of all the current Yu-Gi-Oh decks I've owned, and I've had this uh, deck for a while. Um, I don't mean like for a while, but I mean I've been playing Invokes for a long time, ever since they kind of came out back in I think 2017 or 2016, I think. And originally I was playing the Blue Eyes Invoked engine, so that was kind of fun. You got your big beaters, and you have a constant source of light material to sorry, to fusion summon red sorry um, invoke macabre. And then from there I switched over to the invoke mech knight build, and was playing invoke with mech knights to kind of abuse the link summoning, and um, the some of the psychic mechanics that we were able to kind of combo that off with some of the side frame stuff like side frame driver, side frame omega, or side frame gamma. So that was kind of a cool deck too. And now we finally move on to this iteration of the deck, and in this particular build, we're using the Dogmatica engine to kind of help us act as both extenders and ways for us to gain more advantage. And we splash in Dragoon because why not? We're also a fusion deck, so we can make use of Dragoon relatively well here. Uh, so yeah, so I'm gonna kind of run through my deck and kind of explain to you um, some of my card choices and stuff like that. Um, in terms of the deck in general, I wouldn't say it's a budget deck, but I wouldn't say it's a super expensive deck either, because uh, I have avoided buying some of the more format staples like droplets and triple tactics talent. Um, you could, if you have those, then I would definitely suggest playing those in the deck, especially triple tactics talent. I think works really well in this deck. But since I don't have that, I kind of replaced it with some other cards just to try it out, and so this is not um, the most consistent build, but it is more of a friendly budget build that you can kind of substitute some cards for. Um, and yeah, so I'll explain to you the deck. I'll show you some potential combos and explain to you which each card kind of does and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and just get started then. So the first off, we're gonna definitely need our two materials for Red Eyes Dragoon. So it's gonna be Dark Magician and Red Eyes. So this guy, if you don't know, he's like the best boss monster in all of Yu-Gi-Oh right now. He's super hard to get rid of, super hard to interact with, and overall just a mean card. Turn one, if you are going first, you bring him out, and your opponent's gonna have to deal with it. Play around him, or just ignore him, or deal with it. Um, if you're going second, you can use him to break people's board, and that's also really good. And you can potentially OTK him with Red Eyes Dragoon. If they have no way of stopping him from coming out, then um, you will definitely win from there, because he will just come out, kill two things, swing in for really big numbers, and yeah, that's how you'll kind of burn your opponent out, is just by getting him out there. And he's definitely worth running, even though you're playing a bunch of brick cards, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that later. If you don't have him, because I know he's kind of expensive now. When I bought him, he wasn't that expensive. It was like $30, and it was everyone was opening his tin, and he was really popular last year. But now I know he's hitting like almost a triple digit in terms of getting a single copy of him. So there's cards you can definitely substitute this engine out. You don't even have to technically play him, but I definitely think playing him in this particular deck has giving it like the sort of like the finishing moves that this deck needs. Because this deck, it's a good grind deck, but it really doesn't have any way of killing your opponent before your opponent can recover. Like, yeah, you can summon out Macabre and kind of negate a card here or there, but and kind of stall out the game. But Macabre itself cannot really win the game by itself, so you kind of need something that applies a great tremendous amount of pressure and basically clocks your opponent in 1 or 2 turns. If they can't answer Dragoon, they are just definitely gonna die within the next couple of turns, and that's what he's so good, and that's why he's one of the best cards ever printed in all of Yu-Gi-Oh. I know the new fusion hero guy is coming out, and a lot of people are hyped about that, and he's pretty cool. Um, in Japan, he's definitely played because Dragoon is banned in Japan. I don't think he's gonna make as much of an impact um, in the meta as much as Dragoon has. And in terms of boss monster in general, I think Dragoon beats out the hero fusion quite a bit. And I don't forget the hero fusion's name. Trying to remember, but yeah, I don't remember. He's coming out next set, and everyone's picking up their OT dashers and stuff like that, and that's pretty cool. But I think overall, I think Dragoon's still a better boss monster, even though you're playing a lot more brick cards. If you can get him out, he will single-handedly win you the game. So yeah, that's why we're playing the Dark Magician and the Red Eyes. You don't need more than any of this. This is just the minimum that you'll play. And the reason why you play the vanilla ones, because his effects works off of the vanilla material. If you can use Red Eyes Alternative and stuff like that, but Red Eyes Alternative obviously has a bit more utility since it's not a true vanilla. But we don't care about that. We want him to have his full power, full abilities when you do bring him out, and that's all that really matters. Next off, for the kind of the staple of the deck, the reason why we play the deck is just Alistair the Invoker. Basically, you summon him, you search for your fusion, and then yeah, there's a couple different routes you can go about playing him. You can start fusing, you start link summoning, link climbing. Just a universal, great, normal summonable monster. Recyclable also. And so this is what you're going to be aiming to do every single turn: is summon Alistair, search your fusion, play your fusion, and yeah, that's just the game plan. Ever since the Master Rule, I think 5, with the changes to the fusion summoning mechanic, now that they don't have to go into the extra deck zone anymore, this deck has gotten significantly better because you can now kind of spam Macabres and stuff like that. Before then, you would have to focus on getting out a link monster before you can kind of start spamming your fusion stuff, and definitely was more of a combo variant. But nowadays you can just summon, fuse, and not really have to like bother with the whole extra deck linking material, linking and arrows pointing and stuff like that. So the deck is definitely a lot better overall than it was in I want to say Master Rule 4 or 4.5 or wherever the rules was when they made that change. This deck is inherently weak to graveyard removal and obviously disruption to when you summon Alistair. Obviously, if you summon him, he gets impermanence or effect veilered or ash. You're gonna be kind of in a horrible spot. Or if he's in the graveyard and they like they use like a Call by the Graves or something when you, or a Lancia when you're trying to fuse, then yes, this definitely can hurt the deck a lot, and that's what the deck's main weakness is weakness to graveyard interaction, and obviously search interaction. Unlike Shaddolls, where you can just activate fusion, dump your materials from your deck, and not have to worry about it. Yeah, Alistair actually requires materials in the graveyard and stuff like that for the deck to kind of get its pluses. If there's nothing in your graveyard and there's nothing in their graveyard, or you have nothing set up, he's kind of bad. But I mean, overall, he's definitely worth playing. Definitely worth 3 copies of it. You always want to see him in your opening hand, and that's how you're gonna kind of get the deck to get off the ground, is by just normal summoning Alistair. Next, we're playing the Dogmatika engine, Ecclesia. She's a really good card in the deck. What she does for the deck is she is mainly going to be an extender. Um, she's great as a normal summonable or special special summonable monster, but we namely want to special summon her without actually using her effect. Um, we only ever want to use her effect if we aren't gonna fusion summon. If we aren't gonna fusion summon this turn, then we can normal summon her, activate her effect, or special summon her, activate her effect, and actually net a card off of it. But she's essentially like a Stratos for Stratos, kind of like Alistair. Both of them on, on normal summons will net you a card, which is gonna be our only way of kind of really gaining advantage. But what you want to do with her is you definitely want to use her as an extender rather than a something you put on the board and leave on there by itself. So I think triple Ecclesia is a must in this deck for that reason. And while she may conflict with the overall mechanics of the deck, you just have to know how to play around it and know how to when and where to activate her effect or which one to normal summon. Typically, you're always going to aim to normal summon Alistair, but if that's not possible, then sometimes normal summoners will be fine. Next off, we have the Dogmatika Knight Fleur de Lis, I think. Fleur de Lis is the name of the card. So this card is our main search target for Ecclesia and also an extender too for this deck. The reason why I keep reiterating that extension cards, extenders for the deck is very important is because we want to be able to link summon, link climb into this guy. Oh, not here. That's my side deck. Into Predapan Anaconda, because you really want to be able to either bring this out on turn 1 or turn 2 if you can. He's our main way to go into Red Eyes Dragoon, and he's the most preferred way to go into Red Eyes Dragoon. Yeah, he does cost a bit of life points, but that's fine. Life points, life points is a resource in this game, and so having extenders is very, very important. Back when I was playing Mech Knight's version of this deck, going to him wasn't super difficult, like because you would be able to summon Alistair, summon hopefully a Mech Knight from your hand, either with the column mechanics, and be able to just go into him almost immediately. Obviously, the Mech Knight version of the deck is a little bit more inconsistent because it does rely on your opponent's placement of their cards and stuff like that a little bit more. Otherwise, if you're going first, Mech Knight has always been kind of a hard deck to go first with because you need something like a fusion or something, some way of making 2 cards in the column in order to summon out the Mech Knights. And that was kind of like the main weakness of Mech Knights, is that it needed like those columns and stuff to go off in order for it to work. Where this deck, not so much. This deck, if you open Alistair and you open Ecclesia, you can almost immediately go into Verticonia without, or even Alistair and a for Release Knight, you can almost immediately go into the Anaconda. And I'll show that a little bit later in the video and how you can do that. In case you're unfamiliar with how the deck works, I'll show that a little bit later in the video and how you can get this guy turn 1 pretty consistently. And that's the main goal of the deck, is go into him, summon out the Dragoon, and then set up your Macabre, set up your back row a little bit, and then kind of pass turn. That's the ideal opening for going turn 1. If going turn 2, you can still bring him out, still do the same sort of thing, and kind of force your answer to, or force your opponent to answer Dragoon. If they can't answer Dragoon, they're going to be on the clock, and you have a potential to OTK him that turn too. So yeah, the definitely Dragoon has given this deck a boost that it needs to close out games and to clock your opponent, so that they have to kind of do something. Otherwise, they'll kind of lose if they don't. Next off, let me see here. I'm playing the one of Iris Sword Soul. So this is kind of a filler card, honestly. I would probably play triple Tactics Talent if I had that. I don't have Tactics Talent, so I opted to play what I had here, and I had a Iris, and she's pretty cool. I mean, she doesn't really synergize super duper well with the deck, but she's kind of a cool card in general, and she's kind of a triple tactics talent, kinda during your opponent's turn rather than your turn. I mean, I guess it could be either turn because she is a quick effect, but rarely is your opponent summoning stuff from their hand um, or from their deck during your turn, or extra deck. But how she works is that you you're you need, or there needs to be something negated on the board in order for her to work. And so how this is gonna work is she's supposed to combo pretty well with Verdelise here and with Ecclesia. So how it works is, let's say you have Ecclesia and you have these two in your hand, and it's your opponent's turn. They try to do something. They summon a monster or something, and it's their main phase. You can then summon for at least Knight or the Knight to negate their card, and it could be anything. Elise or Fleur de Lis is also a good out to Dragoon because I think it's a her. Yeah, it's a her. It's her negation ability doesn't target. It's just one face-up monster, doesn't target. So you can target Dragoon over here. Sorry, he was off screen. I didn't realize that. But you can target Dragoon, negate Dragoon's effect to make it not targetable and stuff like that, and kill Dragoon that way. So pretty good out to Dragoon. Also good, kind of like a effect veiler with a body, basically, is what she is. She's an effect veiler with a giant body attached to it. And the only I guess the only downsides of it is that for her to negate a card, you do need another Dogmatika card on the board, or another Dogmatika monster, and or only other Dogmatika monsters is usually going to be just Ecclesia. But yeah, once she's on the board and she negates something, if you have Iris in hand, then her negation effect will help meet her summoning condition. So now that there's a card that's negated on the board, you can special summon Iris whenever you feel like during the main phase. Obviously, I think in the lore they're the same card. Actually, they're the same person or character or champion, whatever you like to call it. And so they had kind of the same similar summoning conditions. It has to be during the main phase, and it can be during either player's turn. And you meet those conditions, you can bring them out. So you summon Iris. If they decided to, let's say, fusion summon, link summon, you can kind of with their whatever they have on the board, you can then go here, destroy a card, or you can preemptively summon her, or they summon something from deck, draw 2 cards. So yeah. The other reason she's also kind of good is if, let's say, you summon an Ecclesia, or mainly it's going to be with an Alistair. So let's say you summon an Alistair, right? And you try to search for Alistair, and they activate, let's say, Effect Veiler or an Ash. So now, technically, your card's been negated. It's on the board. Its effects are negated. I don't know if Ash. I don't remember if Ash will negate the entire card effect, or if it stays negated. I know for sure Impermanence and Veiler will have this card negated. What you can then do is just special summon her from your hand, and then just kind of link away into like a Predaplant Erdoconde, for example. So that's kind of like what she's used for. She's kind of used as an additional extender, and kind of an additional form of interaction and interruption. Granted, she's a lot harder to bring out than her other counterpart, the Knight. She's kind of fun to use, and she has some funny interactions and stuff like that. So just one of her. I don't think there's any more reasons to play more than one. But kind of cool card, kind of on theme with the deck, I guess. So there's that. Next off, we have Pinkertops here. And so Pinkertops is a really good card overall. I mean, it answers a lot of things. Answers certain boss monsters, stuff like that. It definitely a go second card. The way I built my deck here is kind of not really tutored to going first or second. I can go either or. I know there's some decks builds that you'll definitely always want to go first. You're not, if you're gonna go first, then obviously you don't want to be running a Pinkertops or anything, because you can't. There's no way for you to summon him. But overall, I think even if you open this in your opening hand, it's not the worst. Like you can just do whatever. If your opponent is somehow able to out your board, you can kind of use this as a backup plan, like a plan B sort of thing. But yeah, he beats over most 25 beaters or 25 attack monsters, which a lot of boss monsters and sub boss monsters in the game are about 2500 attack. So he beats over a lot of them. Beats over like Macabre, beats over like a Fur Knight if you're playing a mirror match. Beats over Winda, stuff like that. So he's good in that sense. And if he can't beat over it, he can destroy it. You can summon him, use his effect to destroy a opponent's card, monster or whatever. And he also kind of acts as your back row removal. If you're playing against like someone that activated, say, a Imperial Order or something, and you have no way of removing it, you can't use your, Harpy's Feather Duster or MST or something like that, then you can just summon him, activate it, and kill the Imperial Order, or like a spellcaster village or something like that. What he doesn't answer is he doesn't answer Mystic Mind. Unfortunately, Mystic Mind is just one of those cards that are kind of cancer for the game. I hate that card with an absolute passion because it's the only card I ever really kind of struggle to deal with. I don't really play any main deck answers to Mystic Mind. It's not a card that you'll see too often, but playing locals, you'll sometimes run into those rogue decks, or you run into like a Sky Striker deck that is playing it, and that's just one of those things you just kind of have to deal with. And it kind of sucks. This deck has a very inherent good matchup against Sky Striker. There's almost no cards in their deck that can answer a Dragoon. If you set up your board and stuff like that, yeah, you're definitely just gonna beat them out. What's a Kagari gonna do? What's a Widow Anchor gonna do against this? Stuff like that. Very hard for them to answer a Dragoon, or even your other monsters if you have to set up. But your deck will die to their Mystic Mind if you don't really play an out to it, and I opt to not play any outs to that, and I just, if I see it, maybe I'll try to stall it out. If not, I'll just scoop and go game 2 and sign all the removal that I need. But yeah, he's a great card going second. Still a good card overall. Just a one of. Obviously, he's limited for a reason, and yeah, he's kind of a filler if you want to play something else like a triple tactics talent, or maybe some more hand traps, then you can. Yeah, just an optional card there. Next off, we're gonna play the one Shadow Ariel. So this is our only main deck Shadow monster, I guess, and she's namely here so that when you summon Construct, or when you dump with Nadir, you can use her effect, and her effect hits your opponent's graveyard, which is really nice because a lot of decks nowadays, they do require a bit of their graveyards to play with, kind of like ours. And if you hit some of their key cards in their graveyard that they can't recur, then you're gonna be in a good position to win the game. And she's definitely worth playing, especially if you're playing Shadows, but technically we're not. So, but she's still a good card. She's a one of. If you see her in your opening hand, yeah, she's gonna be kind of a bricky card, but otherwise, if you don't see her for the rest of the game, that's fine. Or if you get to summon Construct out really early, you can dump her. Or if you are going second and your opponent has a graveyard set up, you can adhere into an Al Capone, search her with Al Capone, then dump her with the Al Capone effect, and then just use her as a DD Crow, essentially. She's kind of a worse DD Crow in the sense that she is super reactive because she starts in her chain. Oftentimes, that's a little too slow. But the fact that she can hit 3 cards in the graveyard is really good. And that's the one thing that this deck has an issue dealing with, is graveyard effects. Like, we don't really want to be using Macabre and Dragoon to negate graveyard effects, because we're just minusing cards, and the cards are still going to be in their graveyard, and you're just delaying the inevitable, and you're going to lose out in the grind game. So she's one way for us to kind of hit the graveyard and not lose too many cards trying to stop that. Granted, Invocation kind of does the same thing, but Invocation is kind of slow, and sometimes if you're playing against a certain deck that you cannot fuse from their graveyard, then yeah, like if you're playing like against, let's say, earth types or earth attributes or water attributes. We don't really have any fusions that do that, or at least I'm not playing any of the invoke fusions that can fuse with that, and so we're gonna have a more difficult times dealing with earth or water, for example. And so this is one way to kind of deal with that. She is side deckable. You don't really have to main deck her. Uh, I chose the main deck her just to try it out, and the fact that I don't have triple tactics and some other staples. If you have like lightning storms and stuff like that, then definitely you can play lightning storm or triple tactics talent over her. But yeah, I opt to play just a one of just a tryout. And she also serves as kind of a backup play for your your El Shaddai stuff, because we are playing Schism in the deck, and so if you dump um, if you dumped what's her face Acapone, and they somehow call by the graves or something like that, and you had a Schism face down, then you're not gonna be able to start your fusion without having a Shadow in the graveyard. And so she's another way to get another Shadow card in the graveyard to get the whole mechanic started. Um, Also, if you're really desperate and you really need to bring out, like, let's say a construct or a window, you can also use her as fusion material from the hand. So um, let's see here. If you didn't know, Invocation will actually allow you to fusion any fusion monster that you want. Granted, if you are gonna go that route, if you're gonna go ahead and um, fusion summon using Invocation to fusion summon a non-invoke monster, the material has to come from your hand. So for example, if you had this and this, for example, and you wanted to fusion summon a construct, you can technically do that. You can activate Invocation, pitch your two material from your hand to your graveyard, and actually fusion summon a construct or a window if this was a dark type, and do that. But you are minusing 3 cards to bring out one, so you're net negging 2 cards to do that, and that's a really bad way to fuse. But the ability is there to do that if you really needed to. Um, and if you do that, you do proc the aerial, and you'll activate that, send this to graveyard, aerial will activate in a separate chain link, and you can still banish cards like that. So yeah, that's the one thing. Kind of cool, but also limiting about invocations, the ability to do that. And so next thing we're gonna go ahead and show off here is the Triple Ash Blossom. Triple Ash is probably a must, or at least a minimum of 2. I happen to have 3 different arts here, because I think a couple of the other arts are in my binder or my other deck somewhere, and so I just have kind of a mixed match arts here. But either way, I think she's a really good card. Obviously, she's been kind of a format staple ever since her printing. She used to be what Effect Veiler used to be. You always had to play Effect Veiler, but obviously Effect Veiler hasn't been that great lately. It's still playable, still definitely a good card, but Impermanence kind of has taken over her spot as like the king of negation there. So yeah, Ash Blossom still a really good card. Also helps to fuse fire when we need to. That doesn't come up too often, but in the end, that we're more or less a sort of control deck, and so she helps control the pace of the game, and has her payoffs and stuff like that. You want to be hitting things that net your opponent's extra cards, like you want to hit their Power of Desires, for example, or a critical search card, something like that. Um, so you definitely want to save her for those occasions. And yeah, good card overall. Not much to say about that. Next off, we have the Triple Nadir. So Nadir's Servant is really good in the deck. Helps us to regain some of our resources. Nadir is usually always a +1. A good card to play, but the thing is you have to kind of play around it, because it does force you to not be able to special summon from the extra deck if you do activate it. Same thing with Ecclesia. When you play with Ecclesia, you namely want to use her as an extender. You don't really want to be summoning her just to search off a card off of her. Um, the idea is you want to use her as an extender to go into Predapant Anaconda. With Nadir, you want to do all your special summoning and fusioning summoning first, and then activate Nadir to then search for like a fleur if you have Ecclesia on the board, or search for an Ecclesia, add that to your hand. Targets to dump with this is primarily going to be Acapulne or what's his face, Titaniclad. Or if you needed to like remove something, you can also dump an Entis or something like that. So yeah, it's always going to be namely a +2, and so yeah, great card overall. Cool thing about it is you can also add cards from the graveyard to your hand if in case you ran out of targets from your deck. Almost always going to be a live card, and always going to be good to play. Yeah, so we play 3. Just good +1 card. Next off, we have the Magical Meltdown. You do want to play 3 of this. You want to try to get Alistair into your opening hand as soon as possible because he's going to be your main engine. So no reason to play less than 3. Back then, when terraforming was at 2 or 3, you can just play 3 terraforming and 2 of these, and you'll be fine. But nowadays, since terraforming is at 1, you want to play 3 of these. So the 3 Alistair plus 3 of this and plus terraforming will technically equal your a total of 7 Alistairs in your hand, technically, or 7 ways to kind of get Alistair in your hand. So I'll kind of show off the terraforming here. So yeah, in terms of that, terraforming is the only search target is going to just be your Meltdown here. The other cool thing about Meltdown is its interaction when you do fusion summon stuff. Like oftentimes you'll activate Meltdown and you kind of forget that it exists on the board, but it does do other stuff when it is on the field. What it does is it doesn't let your opponent negate your fusion summon cards. So anything that fusion summons, they cannot like Solemn Judgment or Solemn Warning your fusion spell, which is a real good plus. They can, however, ash certain things. So like if you had Meltdown and you play you hard play a Red Eyes fusion, they can ash it because ash is just negating the effect and not the activation. So that's kind of like the unfortunate part about it. But yeah, if you play this and they try to Solemn Judgment it and you have Magical Meltdown on the board, they're not gonna be able to stop Dragoon from coming out. So that's kind of the cool thing. The second cool thing is that when you do successfully summon a fusion monster from the extra deck, so let's say you summon Dragoon or a Macabre, it won't allow your opponent to respond to their summon, which is great. So if they had something like a Bottomless Trap Hole or Torrential Tribute or something like that, you can safely summon out your monsters without them being able to respond to it. Another cool trick is that let's say you activate your fusion summon and you they activate, like let's say an El Shaddai fusion, and they dump some stuff to the graveyard to special summon, say a Winda, and you bring him out. When he comes out, your opponent will not be able to activate any of their Shaddai card effects that they just sent to the graveyard in a separate chain link. So that's kind of like the cool thing, something that doesn't come off that often but will come up sometimes, and you want to make sure that you know the rulings for Magical Meltdown really well, because it does have some cool interaction in some ways to protect yourself, and a lot of people misplay around this card a lot. It's one of the most commonly misplayed card around when I get a lot of like judge call if someone's playing Invokes. It's namely has to deal with how Meltdown interacts with other cards, either through negation or through its second ability where it doesn't allow your opponent to respond or activate effects at all. So yeah, something you should definitely know the rulings to before you attempt to play this deck. Okay. Next off, we have triple Invocation. So you definitely want to play, I wouldn't say play 3 of these, no less than this, namely because of some of the other cards we're going to play in this deck, and I'll kind of show you why you want to play 3 of them. Yeah, Invocation, great card. Reason why you want to play 3 is let's say you have like an Invocation and an Alistair in hand, right? and you go to summon Alistair to try to search for another invocation, if it gets negated or something, you still have kind of a backup invocation to play and still be able to fuse with Alistair, and then get invocation back into your deck, and get Alistair back into your hand. That is the main reason why we played the three. It's just for certain scenarios like that. It does happen quite a bit more than you think, where your opponent will ash your search or the impermanence discard, and obviously this deck cannot take off at all if you aren't able to get the invocations and the Alistair, and especially we're playing 7 Alistairs, and we're basically playing, technically 10 copies of Invocation in that sense, because each Alistair will search for an invocation, but your Alistairs won't search for an invocation if they somehow stop it. So if they stop that, your only other way of getting invocation is to hard draw it or draw another Alistair, and that sometimes is deep down in your deck and you're not going to be able to get it. And so you want to try to consistently try to get invocation in your hand. There are times where you're going to open up with 2 of these and no Alistair, and that's going to be bad. But that will happen. I mean, it's just card games in general. Luck is a factor. So, but consistency is what we're trying to go after too. The breakiness of the deck, breaking will happen. Like there's no way to kind of stop that. But when your deck does work, you want it to be consistently doing what it wants to do, and that's the fusion summon. And so that's why we're playing 3. We're trying to always fusion summon every turn we can, because our entire extra deck is essentially fusion monsters. We aren't really exceeding or linking or doing any other sort of special summoning, where all we're doing is just fusion summoning with this particular deck. And so triple invocation is going to be kind of like a must in this deck, and I'll show you another reason why you need to play 3 of this, at least for this particular build, or the way I built my deck. But yeah, so 3 of those. Next off, 3 Red Eyes fusion. So this is kind of like my own personal choice here. Some people opt to play 2, and 2 will work fine. I opt to play 3 because I've tested a lot of hands and stuff like that, and I almost always want to open up with this if anything else. If nothing else is good in my hand, nothing else is playable in my hand, hard playing a Red Eyes fusion is not a bad idea. Because once you bring out Dragoon, like I said, he can singly hand win you the game. And also the reason why you want to play 3 is just for stats. So the chance of you opening up a Red Eyes and a Dark Magician are still pretty high in the deck. But if you're you want to see this more than you want to see this opening up in your hand. So if you're able to get a fusion in your hand, opening hand, then what you can do is you can activate this, just hard play it, dump the 2 from your deck to your graveyard. That way for the rest of the game you don't have to worry about ever drawing these as brick cards. It does end up breaking these 2 extra copies. That's fine though. This deck is okay with brick cards, because you can always use them. You can always pitch them as costs for Macabre or costs for Dragoon. So that's why, like, playing some brick cards in this deck, that's fine. The only issue is that when you draw these cards, you haven't had a Dragoon out yet or anything, you can't really pitch these cards, because then if you pitch these cards, then let's say you pitch a Dark Magician for a Macabre effect, then now you can have 4 dead cards in your deck, or you turn off the rest of this engine right here. So you want to be really careful with that. Is if you open up these in your hand, try to keep them in your hand, because if it's they're in your hand, you can still fusion summon using the Red Eyes fusion. Dumping that. Worst comes to worst, you can even play Invocation plus this to fusion summon the Dragoon. It's gonna be an inherent minus, but the main thing is that these material has to be either in your deck or in your hand. They cannot be in your graveyard. You cannot invocation these in your graveyard to bring out a Dragoon. That'll be too broken. And just the way the Red Eyes fusion works is that the material has to be from your deck or your hand. I think it can maybe be on your board too. I don't quite remember. Let me check real quick. Yeah, or your field. Technically, excuse me for a second. technically these can be on your board, but you're never, there's no way to summon them out besides just hard tributing it, or maybe like using a monster reborn. But yeah, if once they're in your graveyard, Red Eyes Dragoon becomes dead in the water, and these cards become even harder breaks, and you just want to be careful of that. So you want to consistently get out Dragoon turn 1, either through Predaplant or just through drawing this hard and hard casting it, or hard playing it, and that's okay. Like that's fine. A Dragoon by himself will still be able to win you the game if you can back him up with some back row or some hand traps and stuff like that. It's okay to play 3 of these, and for consistency of getting out Dragoon turn 1, and hopefully not drawing these later in the game. But drawing these, will happen. From given the fact that you play them, you're gonna eventually draw them in your opening hand. It will feel bad, but they're still completely winnable games, even if you draw the vanillas. So moving on, next thing here is gonna be kind of a controversial choice here. Is it's gonna be Pot Desires. So Desire is a very, very greedy card. It does get rid of a lot of your 1-ofs in this deck, and I do play a lot of 1-ofs, and that's why sometimes the deck can be a little consistent, but the card advantage here is still really good. Ideally, you want to be careful with playing this card. Ideally, you want to keep this card in your hand until you can bring out Dragoon first. If you can bring out Dragoon and safely have a Alistair and a Meltdown secured, then you can play this. And that's why we play the triple Invocation here, because there are going to be times where you activate this card, you're going to be banishing a lot of cards from your deck. And there's been times where I hit 2 Invocations, but I'll still have a spare one, and that's fine. The other reason why this card sometimes is good is if you already have Dragoon out and you banished it. Sometimes when you play Desires, you will banish the extra dead fusion cards in your deck, and that will be helpful too. And it doesn't really hurt the Nadir as much, because Nadir you can still search from your graveyard, add it from your graveyard to your hand, so that's not the worst either. You are playing triple Alistair. There's very rarely you'll banish all 3 Alistair, but the main thing is before you activate Desires, you want to make sure you have already dumped your Red Eyes and Dark Magician already to the graveyard to get out the Dragoon first, or in a desperate situation, if you are a really need for cards, then you can still activate it. Chances are you'll banish one of these, and then, like the situation I explained earlier, the Red Eyes Fusion will be dead, Dragoon will be dead, and but that's something you'll kind of have to make a judgment call on, is when you want to use Desires. You can even just play just the 1. I opt to play the 2. Ideally, you're supposed to have Dragoon, Macabre, and Invocation in your graveyard, and somewhere activate Desire, and you want to banish the rest of these dead copies, because I assume that you dump this to the graveyard, you have that. You want to hit Ball Desires, you want to hit these dead copies of cards in your hand, or in your deck, sorry, and then draw whatever 2 cards you need to draw. I used to play, I guess I'll explain it a little bit later in the video, but yeah, so 2 Pot Desires, you can, if you have something else that you want to play, that you want to play instead of this, then that's fine too. This does kind of cut down on your game, your grind game. So just be careful if you're trying to grind out your opponent, and you're going for card, and you're trying to just get ahead. Knowing that this deck is really good at grinding, you may not want to activate this card. Or if you're really ahead and you just need extra cards in your hand to use as negation material, which is what I namely do this for. This is why I namely have Dragoon and Macabre already out on the board, and I need more materials in my hand to negate their stuff. Then I'll play the Desires to get the two cards to for sure have both of their negation up and available to use. Another trick that you can do to kind of make sure that you have a material in your an Alistair and an Invocation is if you do summon Macabre and Alistair is banished and Invocation is in your grave. I know some people will just activate Invocation immediately and send it to the back to deck and grab Alistair back to your hand. You might want to delay that. You might want to leave the Alistair banished, leave Invocation in the graveyard and then activate the desires, banish your stuff and then activate Invocation to put it back in your deck and add the Alistair back. That way you can guarantee that you have a one of each copy of the card. So it doesn't matter what you banish with desires then. But that's kind of like one trick that you should kind of keep in mind and be careful about when playing desires. And so, but yeah, I mean overall desires is still a good card. It's still a good bait to Ash. So if you have an Alistair and a desires, sometimes if you really needed to, you can activate the desires and then they'll Ash it and then you'll be okay. You can summon Alistair and go from there. But yeah, so like I'm also playing not many Nadir targets in my extra deck because I'm gonna assume I'm gonna banish one or two Nadirs off of the desires, and so I don't always need Nadir to dump a card to the graveyard because that's not always gonna happen. But yeah, that's why I'm okay with playing desires in the deck. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. So next up, I'm gonna have a bunch of one ofs here, or one of limited cards. Terraforming being one of them, but I already showed that off. So I have one Mind Control, one Instant Fusion, one Monster Reborn, and one Call by Graves. Call by Graves is pretty self-explanatory. Still a really good card. It's really still a Saki card, but you mainly want to use this against cards like Ash Blossom and stuff like that. You want to wait for him to play the Ash and then play the Call by Graves to remove it. Monster Reborn is an extender. Sometimes you need that extra monster for it to work, for this deck to go off, and Monster Reborn does that. It's always a more or less a live card. So the reason why I say that is if you start off Monster Reborn and start off with Alistair, that's an instant Petter Pant in this deck. So you summon Alistair, do your thing, and then you send the Alistair to the graveyard using Artemis. And so that's in the graveyard. You activate this, bring back Alistair, and then you have two monsters right there to immediately go into Predator Plant. So that's the idea of this entire deck, is to try to abuse that sort of thing, where you can get at least two monsters out on the board, and then summon out the Predator Plant. You don't have to activate Predator Plant immediately. You can still do all your summonings and stuff like that. And you still might want to do that too. You might want to get out Macabre and then activate the Predator Plant. At least Macabre can protect Verticonde from like a effect failure or something like that. So yeah, so this deck is also inherently strong against Nibiru because you're almost always gonna get a Macabre out on like your third or fourth summon before you can continue. And then once you get out a Macabre, then you can safely bring out a Dragoon and not have to worry about Nibiru as much. So it's inherently strong against Nibiru. So that's it. That's one thing. Instant Fusion, I would say, still a pretty good card, even though it's at 1. We do have quite a few Instant Fusion targets in the deck, and like I said, it's just another extender. Idea here is you're just gonna try to get a second monster out. You can summon Alistair, play this, get a fusion monster out, and go off from there. There's some cool tricks I can show with this a little bit later as I kind of talk about the combos, and we'll go over that in the other half of the video. And the last card here is kind of just I want to say just kind of another throw-in card. I don't think Mind Control is super duper great, especially if you're going first. It's not gonna really do much for you. It's kind of a dead card, but it's still a pretty good card. Going second, you can obviously Mind Control something, Link away, or even Fusion Summon away with it. So yeah, Mind Control still has its purposes and its use, and I still think it's a cool card. Definitely, you can cut this out for anything else. You can cut it out for more hand traps if you want to, or something else. Right now, I just kind of have it as a placeholder for now, and kind of figure out the build a little bit more. But yeah. And finally, I'm going to go into the traps, and we don't really play that many traps, but we're going to play Triple Impermanence. Triple Impermanence is still a pretty good card. I'm sure you're aware of what it does. And Impermanence in this deck also combos off with the Iris. So we have five ways of proccing abilities of on our end to summon out the Iris, and obviously your opponent's playing permanents themselves, or if they're um, playing like an effect failure or something like that, or if you're playing against a mirror match, Iris is going to be a live card. It's always going to be pretty good. So, um, yeah, permanents, yeah, good card to set. You want to aim to set it in the same column that your opponent's gonna potentially be playing spells in. I mean, no one really does it, but you can technically just set this in the pendulum zone area. So in case if you're playing against pendulum, yeah, you can flip this and negate their some of their pendulum zone effects. But yeah, namely, you're just gonna set this where your opponent sets their cards. To kind of use it as both a magic and trap negation on top of a monster negation. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal if you can. Otherwise, if you open up with this, you can always just play it from hand. So yeah, really versatile card, really good card. Yeah, no reason not to play 3. You can play 2 if you want to, but I like playing the 3. And that's kind of like your main set anyways. The last 2 cards going to be Shadow Schism and Dogmatic Punishment. So let's start with the Punishment. Pretty self-explanatory card here. It's usually going to be a 2-for-1 answer to most things, because you're going to be probably dumping Entis with this card. So you're going to be nuking or popping 2 cards with it. Worst comes to worst, you can dump like a Titanic Clad, pop something, and then special summon Ecclesia at the end of the turn, and a net basically 2 additional cards. So pretty good. Only problem is you gotta be careful about activating this card, because this card will lock you out of your extra deck for 1 whole turn. So if you play this on your opponent's turn and then it comes your turn, you're not gonna be able to fusion summon. So just be careful with that. I think 1 copy is fine. I don't think you can even cut this card if you want to, because this deck does fusion summon a lot. And so you just want to be careful about using this card. This card is, for me, the idea is if you need to activate this card to come back from the game, you're already in a bad position. This card is meant to kind of keep you ahead of the game. It's in case your opponent is trying to play something to out your board, they're trying to bring out or link summon to out your board, then this card definitely will stop them from doing that. It's kind of like a 1-turn Mantine's Emptiness, I guess, because you want to be hitting monsters with it, with both the Entis and the obviously its primary effect. So that's the main thing. Is this card is meant to keep you ahead so you can win the game probably next turn after the turn you set this, because next turn, if your opponent like clears your board and you activate this, you're gonna be dead. You're not gonna be able to do anything at all. It could be summoning a normal Alistair or normal summoning an Alistair, search a card, and then just end your turn. So be careful about using this card. That's all I gotta say about it. Good card, but yeah, just be careful. It is searchable off of Ecclesia, which is why we do play the 1 copy of it. If it gets banished by like your Paw of Desires and whatnot, you don't really care. It's whatever's, just another trap card there. And the final card is Schism. So Schism is pretty cool in this deck. Like I mentioned earlier, we're only really playing 1 Shadow monster in our deck. Where is she here? So kind of going into the extra deck, and I'll kind of explain the extra deck here and some combos you can do in case you're not aware of how this works. So mainly what you're gonna do and how Schism is gonna work is, if Schism is in your deck, and let's say you have just a Nadir, right? So let's say Nadir is our only card in our hand. It doesn't really matter too much, but you can activate Nadir, and you're gonna send cards from your extra deck to the graveyard. Let me actually show you off the extra deck first before I explain some of the combos and stuff. I guess it'll make more sense once you see the extra deck. So let me sort this out real quickly here. Alright, so in terms of extra deck, we're obviously playing the 1 Dragoon. I know he's a bit of an expensive card. Not quite affordable, not quite budget anymore. But yeah, just the 1 Dragoon. You're never going to bring out 2. You do play the Monster Reborn, so if they do somehow get rid of this, you can always Monster Reborn him back. But he won't get his ability to destroy monsters anymore, but he still has his negation ability, which is still pretty cool. So yeah, just the 1 Dragoon. Put it over here. 2 Macabres. It's going to be our main fusion monster that we're going to go into. So the idea here is to set up Dragoon and set up Macabre. And so those are the 2 main main ways to get out or onboard negation. So 2 copies is good. I don't think you need to play 3. You're never gonna really be summoning out 3. If you are summoning out 3, then you're already behind and you're grinding out, and it's not gonna be a good time for you anyways. So just the 2 macabres there. Next, you're gonna play Alagodis. I think all the Godis, however you pronounce the name. So yeah, this card's a really good card for control too. Namely, is like you can just fuse if you have something like a macabre in your graveyard, and Alistair, you can fuse away macabre and Alistair to summon this guy out, and he's pretty good on summoning. He destroys a special summon monster, and he's kind of a pain in the butt for your opponent to deal with because his ability is free. So if you just have it in defense, it's kind of like a Moonlight Rose Dragon. You just have it in defense. Every time they summon something, you can choose to destroy that card, and it kind of hits them kind of hardly because you're always going to be plussing with it. And if they can't deal with it, it's gonna be hard for them to come back to do something. So yeah, pretty good card. Just the one of. You don't always summon them out. If you do get to summon out, it'll just kind of keep you ahead. Next off, you have the Purgatrio. So this card, way you get this out is you fusion summon with the Ash Blossom, or if you're playing against a fire type, then great, you can do that. And yeah, the cool thing about it is it sometimes can provide you with a potential OTK. If your opponent's playing a lot of weak monsters on the board, or they have something in defense with 0 defense or something like that, you can pierce through that and just kind of kill them off. And so yeah, Purgatrio. If not, you can use Purgatrio as just a extender body. Yeah, not too bad. And I've won a few games just doing that. The opponent sets up a bunch of weak monsters, you just summon Purgatrio and just attack everything and win the game from there. Especially if you have Dragoon too, you're gonna be burning your opponents for a lot of life points anyways with Dragoon's effect. And so yeah, Purgatrio is another good way to finish off your opponent by just piercing and doing big damage that way. Another cool thing is you can kind of buff Purgatrio up with Alistair by just making him a 3300 attack minimum. By just ditching Alistair, pumping him up, or you have like 2 Alistair, this thing's gonna be hitting for like a truck. 4300 attacking everything with piercing is definitely nothing to laugh at. So yeah, real good card to kind of finish the game from there. Another card we're playing is Raijin. Raijin's not too great. There's no way for us to actually fusion summon him in this deck, outside of the one instant fusion that we play. And so instant fusion with him is pretty good. Instant fusion, if they have a threat or something that you need to get rid of, you can just flip it face down and then link away the Raijin. The reason we're playing him now is because win cards are going to be the meta next format, and so we do kind of want some way of playing some interaction with win. But I mean, overall, unless they're playing like draw and lock or something, we're really not gonna be able to summon out Raijin as much. But he's there for just kind of like utility and whatnot, and he's still a good card for our Super Poly. So we do play Super Poly, but we're just side decking it. We're not main decking the Super Poly because of how tight the extra deck space is. I didn't think I'd be able to main Super Poly, and I'll kind of explain that in a second here. Next is we're gonna bring out Kaliga. Kaliga is pretty good. Good floodgate overall, and pretty easy to summon in this deck. Kaliga with instant fusion is pretty good. You'll see why in a second. And you want to bring out Kaliga when you think your opponent's going to try to spam. You can bring out Kaliga with like a Dragoon, and you can just sit on that. Like you can negate their one card effect or their one monster effect or something, or they activate their one monster effect. They're gonna be done for the rest of the turn. They're not gonna be able to really do anything else, and this kind of hard locks them down. It's our version of Mystic Mine, essentially. A crappier Mystic Mine, but this we can break parity pretty easily. You can always link him away to break parity and go off from there. And yeah, Kaliga's a pretty good fusion card. We don't play the Earth and we don't play the Water because Earth and Water ones aren't too great. Their effects aren't that great, and the attribute is kind of rare anyways, and so we're not gonna bother with the Earth and the the water ones. Next off, we're gonna play the Stoll package here. So you have Al Capone, Construct, and Winda. So I'll go back to this sort of combo and kind of explain to you what you're supposed to do with Nadir. So the way how this combo works is if you activate Nadir, what you're gonna do is you're primarily gonna send Al Capone to the graveyard here, right? So Al Capone will get sent. I'm gonna assume you're gonna have some other cards in your hand, but if you don't, if this is the only card you have in your hand, this will still work. So you're gonna send Al Capone, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna activate. Nadir is gonna resolve. You're gonna search for a monster with 2,500 attack or less. That is a Dogmatika, so you can either search for Ecclesia, or you can search for the Fleur Knight if you want to. Either one, it doesn't really matter. So let's say we search for this, we add this to our hand. What's going to happen is Al Capone is going to activate its effect, and now you should be able either effect 1 or effect number 2. You want to use effect number 2. So effect number 2 is going to let us add any Shadow card from our graveyard or deck to our hand. So in this case, we have essentially two main targets here. So we have Schism, and we also have, if we can find it, should still be in here somewhere. Schism. Hello? Did I? Oh, okay. Here she is. So these are two main targets that we're going to be searching for. So if you search for a Schism, then what you want to do is you want to discard the Ecclesia, because that's just part of Al Capone's effect. She forces you to discard. So you're gonna discard. So this is gonna be in your graveyard, right? And then you would set the Schism. So here, because we're assuming this is the bare minimum in our graveyard right now. Obviously, you're probably have some other stuff in your graveyard. You're gonna probably have a dark type, or you're gonna have some other light type. But if this is our graveyard, what happens is what we're allowed to do. If let's say we have another dark type, let's say we had Dragoon or something, and we dump the Dark Magician, right? Into our graveyard. So if you activate Schism during your opponent's turn, you can fusion summon a Shadow monster. So if you want to, you can remove the Al Capone and the Dark Magician to summon a Winda, and then obviously Schism also sends a monster from the board to the graveyard. That's the same type as the fusion summon. So if you are playing against a dark type, you can use Schism as to kind of interruption to send one of their monsters to the graveyard, while also bringing out the Winda to be a pain in the butt. So that's one way you can do. Or if you needed to, you could potentially fusion summon with the Dogmatika, Virtuous, and or Ecclesia and Al Capone, and bring out the Construct. And most of the time when you summon Construct, you're not going to really be using our effects, but because we are playing this in our main deck, you can even activate Construct to send Ariel from our deck to the graveyard, and then activate Ariel to banish 3 of their cards. So that kind of is also kind of like the cool thing you can do there. Some people opt to play a dragon, a Shadow Dragon or Shadow Beast instead, but I think Ariel will be better in the long term, even though her other effects aren't that great. Her flip effect is kind of garbage, but or at least in our deck it's kind of garbage. But the removing stuff from the graveyard is going to be very important, very good, and so that's why we want to send her from the extra deck or from our deck to the graveyard using Construct if possible. So that's one way to use Al Capone and Nadir Servant. The second way is obviously what you can do is you can activate Nadir Servant, still search Ecclesia or whatever you want, and then you can still dump the Al Capone to the graveyard, and then search for an Ariel, and then resolving Al Capone's effect, you're gonna just pitch the Ariel to the graveyard, and then hit your opponent for 3 cards in their graveyard. So that's kind of like the thing you can do there, right? So you can you'll have this in the graveyard, and you hit them in the graveyard. Obviously, you won't have the Schism to fusion summon during your opponent's turn, but that's fine. Like you can that's kind of like the cool interaction there. Some people opt to play multiple Al Capone because then you can send another one. If you had another slow fusion, you can summon it, send another Al Capone, grab the aerial back from your graveyard, and then send it back from the graveyard, from your hand to the graveyard, and hit your opponent again for another 3. So you can kind of do a loop with that if you're playing more than one Al Capone in your deck. So that's another loop you can try to do. But yeah, so that's kind of like the main reason why we kind of play the Shadow Fusion package. Also, the reason why we do that is, let's say if we had another card in our hand, like a Dark Magician or something like that, and we activate Nadir Servant, right? Sorry, let me fix this up real quick. So let's say we had just any card. So activate Nadir Servant. You're gonna search for an Ecclesia, and then you're gonna dump an Al Capone. You're gonna search for a Schism, and by resolving, Al Capone's effect, you can just ditch whatever other third card you have in your hand that you don't need. And what you can do here is you can just normal summon the Ecclesia, activate her effect, search for a Fleur to add to your hand, and then since we can't really fusion summon or anything else this turn, you can just set this and fuse during your opponent's turn using the Schism. So that's kind of like another neat trick there. So you'll have like a knight in your hand, Al Capone to summon, or a Dogmatic Ecclesia, and a Fleur at least to summon to act as a negation there, and then you can also interrupt your opponent's play by obviously fusing for either a construct or a window at that point. Also, another thing you can do is, let's say you went for a window first, right? So let's say you fuse for a window first. So you did, like, let's say this is in your graveyard, right? And so you banish, say, Dark Magician and Al Capone, summon the window during their opponent's turn, and they somehow manage to out this. They somehow manage to kill the window. It goes to the graveyard. You can't activate Window's effect because there's nothing for us to add back to our hand, right? So next turn, it's your turn again. You can still use a Schism. You can activate Schism again, banish the window, banish a I don't know, I guess a knight or an Ecclesia, and then summon a construct. So Schism will allow you to fusion summon hopefully twice, is what we're aiming to do, is either summon out the construct or the window, and that's the main purpose of Schism. So two kind of free fusion summon, which is great. And then obviously when you summon construct, you just dump another aerial, and there you go, you have materials for another fusion summon if you're playing more than the basic 3 here. Yeah, and that's how one way you can do it. Or another thing is, you don't even have, if you had like the Schism and you had aerial in the graveyard, you can also activate this to fusion summon like aerial and a knight away, or aerial and like a dark type away, and get these out here. Also, I guess on top of that, if you didn't know, like if you successfully summon a window, right, and it goes to the graveyard, and then you banish a window and a Fur Knight to bring this out, you can technically, in all technicality, set the aerial, and if your opponent doesn't do anything, you can flip the aerial, or they attack into the aerial, you can actually bring back the window from your banished zone, because it was successfully fusion summoned. And so you're allowed to do that. You will not be able to bring back the Al Capone, because Al Capone was not successfully fusion summoned, so you're not going to be able to bring this back no matter what, unless you've fusion summoned for it specifically, then sure, but that's really rare. Getting this thing out is two shadow monsters with different attributes is going to be pretty rare to have on your board. So most of the time this is used to kind of dump with Nadir and get your combo going. Okay, so I kind of went on the tangent there. So yeah, so you're playing these 3 as your El Shaddai fusion combo thing, and you can even opt to not even play this package if you really feel like you're running tight on extra deck space and you'd rather play some Link stuff instead, or some more materials for, let's say, Super Poly. Then you can just completely remove this and play Super Poly and stuff like that instead. But I figure since I'm playing the Nadir Servant, I want to be able to do something with it. I want it to be able to plus and have some sort of interaction with the Nadir Servant, and so that's the kind of like the combo there is to do that, because we don't really have too many Nadir servant targets to really plus per se, and so that's one way for us to plus. The only others real good one to pitch with Nadir would be Titanic. So you can dump Nadir or Titanic with Nadir, and then obviously you can search or summon um, an Ecclesia or a Fur Knight if you needed to at the end of the turn. So it's a little slow, but it does net you 1 or 2 cards depending on how you play it. So yeah, the Titanic are our only other way for us to plus off of the Deer Servant, because the Deer, you don't want to be sending any of these to the graveyard. Like, all of this is you want to keep this in your extra deck to be able to fusion summon, and mainly you could be sending these to the graveyard with the Deer. And in terms of that, your other target for the Deer is going to be one Entis here. So Entis is pretty versatile. Once she gets sent to the graveyard, you can kind of pop whatever card you want, whether it's a spell, trap card, or monster, or whatever. So those are our main 3 Nadir targets. And it might seem a little low, but that's fine, because we're playing Pot of Desire. I expect that we're going to be banishing 1 to 2 copy of this when we do play the Desire, or in the event that we never draw Nadir that game, then this, it's whatever's. Because our extra deck spaces are already tight enough. If we don't get Nadir Servant off, don't worry about it. Who cares at that point? So we only really need 3 targets. I can show you some other targets that you can play instead if you don't want to go with this type of package. But I think after test playing, I think this is all we really need here. We'll either see Nadir and be able to go into one of these, or we don't see Nadir at all and never go into any of this. But that's fine. Next, we obviously have the Verticonde. Not much to say here. You can play Verticonde, fusion summon the Red Eyes. That's its main use. Or if you play, if you main deck or side deck a Super Poly, you can also do that. You can activate Verticonde, Super Poly away itself plus another monster or your opponent's monster, and do that. Shenanigans there. Not much to say about that. Really expensive card now. I got this at I think when did I pick it up? About like $17 or something like that when it kind of initially came out. But now it's ridiculously expensive, and so that's why I'm saying this deck is not really budget, but it's not really, it's super expensive. I guess I'll go with this card next. So here is Artemis. Artemis is going to be our way to sort of enable a lot of our combos and enable us to get a light type. So she's very important to play in the deck. She takes the place of these two over here. So the old sort of style that we used to play would be Amarage into a secure Gardena, and that would be how we would 1 turn get out a free Alistair. So you would, or sorry, a free Macabre. You would, the old traditional ways, you summon out your Alistair, right? You search for your Invocation, and then you send your Alistair to the graveyard, summon an Amarage, send Amarage to the graveyard, summon Gardena, activate your Invocation, banish these 2, and then that's one card Macabre right there, while having Macabre adding Alistair back off. Nowadays, same idea, but taking up less extra deck space. Summon normal Alistair, search Invocation, send Alistair with Artemis, and there you go. You have a one card Macabre right there. Another thing you can do, and it also kind of protects you from the Biru because you're not summoning as much. So that's the thing. So another thing is, like, if you have her out on the board, she also enables you to do this. This is a very important trick to learn for the deck, and you definitely should know how to do it here. So let me kind of show you the cards here that you're gonna need. Yeah, so I think it's just these 2 cards. So when you summon her, what you can then do is you can summon either of these. You can, if you have either of these in your hand, you want to use them as extenders. So you could special summon Ecclesia. Ecclesia, her special summoning condition is as long as you have a monster or anyone that has a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck, you can special summon her for free. When you special summon her though, you do want to be careful not to use her effect at all. You don't want to use her effect because if you do use her effect to search for something, then you lock yourself out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn, and you don't want that. You want to be able to summon her, send her in Artemis to the graveyard, and then summon the Verconde. That way you're guaranteed to get a Dragoon out. Same ideas with Fur. If you you have her and Fleur, you can just special summon the Fleur, and then use them to go into the Verconde. So yeah, that's kind of like the most important aspect of the deck that you kind of need to know is to how to have extended your hands, when to use them, and when to get out the Verconde. So the sooner you can pump out the Dragoon, the better. And if your opponent answers the Dragoon, that's fine. You know, he's there to kind of waste your opponent's time to either try to answer him, or if your opponent can't answer him, you know, you win off the Dragoon. So yeah, that's the extra deck. We're only really playing 3 link monsters. We're only really linking into oh, sorry, one more card here. Yeah, our main 2 link monsters that we're always going to be going into is this. This is also good because you can also use you can also send Ecclesia, because she's also a spellcaster, to the graveyard. So either Ecclesia or Alistair will get her out. But obviously, if you summon Ecclesia and you send Ecclesia to the graveyard to summon her, that oftentimes doesn't do anything unless you already have like another Ecclesia in the hand. If you had like another Ecclesia or a Knight in hand, then that would be the only time you would ever do that, is to like normal summon Ecclesia, not use her effect, send her to the graveyard, summon out an Artemis, and then summon one of these 2 again to kind of go into the Verconde. But that's really neggy, but I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, getting Artemis out will definitely help you use these cards as extenders, and that's what you namely want to do. And the final card that we're going to play, and this one's also a very cool but tricky card to play with, is going to be Cross Sheep. So Cross Sheep in this deck can be kind of nutty sometimes, and it requires a huge amount of setup. But if you are able to set it up and your opponent doesn't see it coming, then it can definitely blow out your opponent from the game, because you're going to be getting so much random advantage that your opponent's like, what, it really does that? So Cross Sheep is very tricky. Like I had to read this card a couple of times to kind of understand what it even does. So it just says that if it's out on the board, and depending on what is pointing towards on the summon, when you fusion summon or you special summon a card to the zone that it points to, it activates one of the 4 effects that it has. So most of the time people think that when you have Cross Sheep, you summon a fusion summon, then you get the Cross Sheep's effect. Obviously, Cross Sheep's effect when you fusion summon monsters, you can bring back a level 4 or lower monsters. So oftentimes the only cards that we can bring back would be, or at least in this particular deck, let me go ahead and pull them out real quick. Yeah. So these are our only cards that Cross Sheep can bring back. So it doesn't really matter. None of these are really gonna do anything except for this card right here. So like, you know, Ecclesia can activate her effect either when she's normal or special. So that's pretty cool. Alistair doesn't do jack squat when he's special, so it's kind of pointless. Same thing with these two other cards. They don't do jack squat except for their bodies. And I guess if you're playing the Link variant, you could use these bodies to Link climb better with Cross Sheep, but we don't really care about that as much. So I'll kind of explain what this thing does. So, all right. So let's say our board. Let me just set this up. Let's say we somehow get the Cross Sheep out, right? And let's say Ecclesia is in our graveyard, and what's in our hand could be an Elise or yeah, probably an Elise or probably an Iris here. So it doesn't really matter too much. So cool thing is, let's say you had this and you had a one of these on the board, and it's pointing towards it, right? Um, the cool thing is during your opponent's turn, during the main phase or whatever they're doing, the way to make this card kind of work and to net you some insane advantage is if it's pointing to this. Obviously, in our deck, there's no way to kind of fusion summon during our opponent's turn. So like if you had just like this out on your board and nothing else, then obviously Cross Sheep's not gonna do anything. You need Cross Sheep to be pointing towards specifically a fusion monster. So it needs to be pointing towards any kind of fusion monster here. And what you can do is let's say your opponent does something and then you decide to let's say you also have here like example, let's say this is what your board looks like, right? So, and this is one of these is in your hand. So what you could do during your opponent's turn, it's kind of tricky. It's like I said, it does require a bit of a setup, but unless your opponent kind of knows what Cross Sheep is trying to do here, it might just kind of blindside them. So let's say they summon a monster, they try to do something, they activate an effect or whatever. What you can do is you can special summon a knight on the board and negate something if that's the case, or if you're playing permanence and you permanent something, you can also do an iris instead. But what happens is you want to see, what you want to do is you want to summon it in the zone where the Cross Sheep is pointing towards. This doesn't really matter, you can even do this without the Ecclesia. You can always special summon the knight even and not have her do anything. But what you can do is just summon out the knight. And what happens is if you have a Ecclesia in your graveyard, specifically Ecclesia, because like I mentioned, while you can have the other cards like the Ash Blossom and this in your graveyard, you don't really want to be bringing any of these targets back from your graveyard because they don't do jack squat on summon. What you want to do is you want to summon this. Cross Sheep is going to activate its effect because what it does is it checks what's in its zone. It checks that you special summon something in its zone, and it also checks what it's pointing towards. Right now, it's pointing towards a fusion monster. So because it's pointing towards a fusion monster, it will activate its effect. Even this is during your opponent. So you special summon this, checks its what's in the zone, checks that you special summon, checks that you have a fusion monster, and then activates its effect. You can special summon an Ecclesia. And what that does is it allow you to search for another knight card or something else. It allows you to plus off of that. So based off of this one summon, you should be able to plus 2 from there. You'll get an Ecclesia out on board, and you might be able to search for like another knight or maybe another punishment or something like that. So that's just kind of a cool thing you can do, and you can kind of play around with that. And if you're playing the link variant of this Cross Sheep definitely helps you to link climb really easily. And so that's just a sort of a mini setup, a mini combo that you can kind of try out. And yeah, it's a little tricky to set up. Doesn't always happen, but if it does happen, most of the time people aren't going to expect this. They're just going to assume that because we're playing Invoked, we're not going to be able to fusion summon during their turn. Most time you don't. Because the most common combination of this is when you play against Shaddolls, they'll fusion summon with El Shaddol fusion. They'll summon something here, and then they'll bring back a dragon, or they'll bring back like a falcon or something using Cross Sheep. With our deck, and if you're playing even a Invoked or a Dogmatika Shaddol, you can do the same thing. You can have like a window here, special summon this, activate. Well, obviously not a window, but if you had like a construct, because window would kind of stop you from summoning with Cross Sheep. But if you had like where is it? A construct, for example, instead, then you can special summon and summon another monster here, and you have like you can special summon like a beast or something, or not a beast, sorry, like a dragon or a Skomada or something. You can summon it right here, and then you have another El Shaddol fusion. You can fuse these two away, summon out another construct, and then again, have materials for that. Obviously, Cross Sheep, you're going to use it once per turn, so you're not going to be able to keep special summoning, but the fact that it gets you a body every time that you can special summon both during your turn and your opponent's turn, it's pretty good. But ideally, you want to be doing it during your opponent's turn, because you should be able to activate a Ecclesia, search a card, and you'll be locked out of your extra deck, but you're not going to be really special summoning fusion types during your opponent's turns anyway. So yeah, that's kind of just the setup with the cross sheep. You honestly don't have to play it, but I mean I play it just because, just for the kind of like the synergy between this and that, and so there you go. So I've talked quite a bit about that. Don't think I missed any other cool combo. I guess the one other combo here would be with the Caliga. So Caliga, the only real way of bringing it out is with these two cards. It's cool. What you can also do instead of bringing out Ecclesia is you can also summon out a Caliga too. So that's kind of funny. So if you have, let's say, a Macabre on the board, right? And let's say you've instant fusion a Caliga earlier in the turn, it has to be special summon, or it has to be fusion summon in order for this to work. If you dump this to the graveyard with an idea and try to summon it with a cross sheep, it will not work. Just keep in mind, just the way the Yu-Gi-Oh works is that you have to fusion summon these cards in order to bring them back properly, and instant fusion does fusion summon them. So if you fusion summon him, use him as material for, let's say, a predator plant or whatever. You send him to the graveyard, he's in your graveyard, he's properly fusion summoned. What you could do is similar idea to earlier. If you had let's say a Macabre on the board, right, and this is in your graveyard, and you have like a knight or an iris or something, you special summon the knight, you can activate cross sheep and then summon out this during your opponent's turn. So kind of a fun trick you can do there. You can kind of lock them out for the rest of the game too, just doing that. So your main targets with cross sheep are going to be the Ecclesia or the Caliga. If you get one of these into your graveyard, those are going to be your main targets to special summon with the cross sheep. So keep in mind that's kind of like the cool combo there. You could always summon a you can always summon an Alistair also.